Hi everyone, my name is Natalie. Today I'm going to do a tag video. This is going to be slightly different because I've created my own tag. So basically the reason I made this tag is because I wanted to talk about nonfiction, and I thought a fun way to do it would be a tag form, so questions for me to answer, so to sort of guide my discussion about nonfiction. So if you like the questions, feel free to make a tag video of your own. Based on these, and I would love to see it if you do. So this is the this or that tag with the nonfiction edition. Most of these questions sort of relate to things that I've noticed about my nonfiction preferences and how they sort of differ from sometimes what I think I want and what I actually enjoy reading. And it has definitely been a process in finding the nonfiction books that I like to read, not just books that are very popular within the nonfiction genre. So without further ado, let's get into the questions I've made for the this or that nonfiction edition. The first question is science or humanities? So basically the kind of topics you enjoy reading. I first started out with a focus on humanities, especially psychology has been a topic that I've always found interesting. Even in like before high school, I've always been drawn to psychology and theory within this area or field, and my studies have also led me towards the humanities. Lately I've been more interested in discovering science topics. I've been more easily drawn into a nonfiction synopsis when it has been towards sciencey topics, just because that is what I've been craving recently, and I feel like that has also sort of been awakened through my nonfiction reading and reading memoirs and hearing them mention things like, for example, I read Grand Obsession last year, which was a book about the creation of pianos and the building of pianos and all of the things that goes into creating a piano, but parts of the book was about the physics relating to our listening to music, and those parts I found the most interesting. So I've been looking for a book that sort of deal with those parts specifically. I haven't quite found that title yet, so if you have any recommendations, definitely let me know. The second question is memoirs or biographies? So which one do you prefer most? Obviously all of these questions could be that none of the answers quite apply, or that you like them equally. In my case, I think that I have enjoyed a lot of memoirs because those are the ones I've read the most so far. I have enjoyed biographies as well, but I haven't read them as often, or at least I haven't finished them as often, because biographies are usually very big, at least the ones that I've picked up, and they require a lot of time and they're usually very heavy, so I haven't actually finished a lot of biographies. But for example, the Walt Disney biography that I read last year and the beginning of this year by Neal Gabler was really good, and I think in my case it definitely depends on who the biography is about and what the memoir is about. So I don't think I usually like memoirs that are too personal. I like the personal aspect, but I prefer them to have a focus. So for example, I read Leap in March, I think, that was about this woman learning to swim, and she talked specifically about her swimming learning and progress and some history about swimming, and that kind of memoir I really like. I don't really have a preference yet, but I feel like I've historically been reading more memoirs, so we shall see how this ends up being later down the line. The third question is wide scale or specialized? Basically what I mean is the nonfiction books that have a wide scope, so they deal with a larger time frame or a bigger picture in terms of like history. It could be a grander picture of the World War II, whereas the more specialized would be, for example, one battle or one specific date. I think that generally I am drawn to the wide scale books, just because I think that they are more complete. They give a better overall picture of what has actually happened, and it's harder to get that wide scale with with being too close to the subject. In terms of actually reading and enjoying, I think probably I enjoy the specialized more. Because I think they are more easily to digest and to fall in love with a subject. It can very easily be overwhelming with a wider scale, especially if it's a topic you're unfamiliar with. The fourth question is new releases or classics. So when I say new releases, basically I mean the last couple of years. With nonfiction, a classic nonfiction is obviously much more recent than a fiction book, because most of the time nonfiction has this tendency to become outdated quite soon because of new research being developed, times changing, and so it's not quite the same as fiction, with which you can read a fiction book from 200 years ago and still find a lot of it to be very relevant to current contemporary society. Obviously you can read classics for other purposes within nonfiction. I would say that I definitely lean towards the new releases when it comes to nonfiction. The newer the better is usually how I think about it. So if I have the option of 2 books about a specific topic, I will always choose the new one if I haven't gotten a personal recommendation for the older one. And I think in general I have avoided a lot of classic nonfiction because I just feel like I need to have sort of a personal recommendation to know it's worth it, and to know that it has a lot of value even if it is older. Then I might consider picking it up. For example, I picked up James Baldwin's The Fire Next Time, I think is the title, because of Ashley from Climb the Stacks did a video about James Baldwin in this particular book, and she talked so interestingly about the book that I decided to pick it up immediately. The fifth question is national or international. Basically what I mean by this is national or international topics or history or even writers. Do you read books, nonfiction books from your own country or about your own country, or from all over the world, translated nonfiction, for example? So I don't really read much in the way of Swedish nonfiction. One of the exceptions to that was Domarens Dårkista, which I read last year, and that was about a Swedish judge, who basically talked about the Swedish legal system and based a lot of the discussion and critical discussion on his personal experiences and long career. I thought that book was really good, and I wish it was translated so other people could read it and I could recommend it more strongly. But I don't really read much in the form of Swedish nonfiction, just because I don't really know what's out there. I have a lot of sources for nonfiction recommendations and things like that through the bookish community online and Instagram and BookTube and Goodreads, etc. But I don't really have good sources for that when it comes to Swedish nonfiction. A major part of the nonfiction books that I read are by UK or US writers and about UK-US topics. I feel like I don't really read much in the way of translated nonfiction. That is something I definitely would like to change in the next coming months or years, because I think I miss out on a lot of interesting books just because I end up reading very English-speaking world centered narratives, and obviously there's a lot more to the world except for the UK and the US. The sixth question is comfort zone or always exploring. I think if you've been on my channel for a while and seen a few videos, you probably know I have very wide interests within nonfiction. I am interested in a lot of topics and things, and I get to sort of to feed my multiple interests through nonfiction reading, which is one of the reasons I'm so drawn to it. I love learning about like niche fields and learning about things that I wouldn't be able to get to learn about through any other medium. Just recently read a book about conducting, and that is something that I've always been curious about, exactly what they do with the waving, both the waving the hands and waving the stick, and I've just never really understood what exactly they they do, how their job works. And so that book was really fun to learn about those things. There's so many topics that I would love to learn about. If I have a comfort zone, it's probably nature writing and natural history. And specifically animal nonfiction, because I have read a few nature writings that deal with nature outside of, so leaves and woods and things like that, and I haven't enjoyed it as much as animal nonfiction. The seventh question is physical copies or audiobooks. I think a lot of the early nonfiction books I read, I listened to as audiobooks. Some of the earliest ones was Feminist by Roxanne Gay, which I listened to an audiobook. I've listened to a few memoirs and things like that. And I do really like audio for nonfiction. When I listen to audiobooks, I have often preferred to listen to nonfiction over fiction. And that is one of the reasons I've consumed a lot of nonfiction through audio. I do still like to pick up nonfiction books through audio, but because they are so expensive, I tend to go through the library to get my audiobooks. It's mostly dependent on what my library has. Although I will say that from my experience so far, I've realized that I like audio for memoirs, for essays, for biographies. All of the personal stories I think work really well with the audio format. However, when a nonfiction book is too fact heavy, it's harder for me to really digest it through the audio version. It also greatly depends on the narrator, but I would say generally speaking I prefer fact heavy books in the physical copy format, but it can be avoided as a problem if I have the physical copy with me and listening to the audio, so I can note things down with the copy in front of me while I'm listening. But generally speaking, personal type stories I like in audio, otherwise I usually stick with the physical copies. That was the nonfiction this or that book tag. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you're having a really good day, and I will talk to you soon.